KETV Newswatch 7, chronicling the stories impacting our community. Stories making a difference. Stories that matter to you. This is KETV Newswatch 7's Chronicle.
What all I wanted for Christmas is property tax relief.
There's a way out of this, but it's not continuing down the path that we're on. We need to start thinking outside the box.
We'll spend about 30 days talking about the budget. We'll waste about 20 days in filibusters, and then we'll have 10 days to get something done.
I think that people will be digging in more on some issues.
I think we'll accomplish much. Not everybody will win everything. Not everybody will lose everything.
Well, the clock is ticking for Nebraska lawmakers. They now have less than 50 days to get their work done, and they face some monumental issues this session. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Rob McCartney. This is KETV Newswatch 7's Chronicle, and today we're taking a closer look at three key issues confronting state senators right now. I'm calling it the Cash and Corrections session. It includes the budget and how to cover a nearly $200 million revenue shortfall, looming prison problems like overcrowding and understaffing, and whether the state can afford property and income tax relief. Well, earlier this month, Nebraska Governor Pete Ricketts laid out his plans during his fourth State of the State address, saying everyone will need to give a little to get this all done. So what does he want to accomplish? Here's KETV Newswatch 7's Andrew Ozaki with the governor's wish list.
I am happy to report that the state of the state is strong and growing.
But the governor says there are problems that need to be fixed, including filling a $200 million budget gap and providing property tax relief.
We have to show our taxpayers that we get the message.
The governor says his new proposal provides $4 billion in property tax relief over the next 10 years. Homeowners and farmers receive refundable credits when they file their state income taxes,
which ensures that Nebraskans, not absentee landowners, receive the credits.
The governor has not given up on trimming the state's top income brackets, including it in his tax package. He quoted newly hired Husker head football coach Scott Frost in pulling together to get the job done.
He offered a formula for winning that applies here.
Senator Steve Erdman has offered his own property tax relief plan.
I've never talked to one person that wanted income tax relief, not one.
He says he will work with the governor, but still supports allowing voters to decide.
It's my full intent to support that petition drive. We'll get it on the ballot, and then the legislature will have to make a decision in 2019 what they're going to do.
The governor is calling for across-the-board spending cuts of 2% and 4% over the next 2 years. His plan spares K-12 education, corrections, and services to developmentally disabled. But the University of Nebraska would be slashed by an additional $36 million.
The governor wants to grow the state. Cutting the university, which is one of the #1 ways that we recruit and retain young Nebraskans, isn't the way to go. I would like to see the governor support the university other than just the football team.
In Lincoln, Andrew Ozaki, KETV Newswatch 7.
And we are talking with several senators this morning. I want to begin with State Senator Jim Smith from Papillion. He's Revenue Committee Chairman and is basically walking point for the governor's tax plan. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning.
So right now there's a nearly $200 million budget shortfall. Governor suggests 2% immediate across the board cuts, 4% in 2 years. Is there fat in the budget where that can come from?
Well, as with any business, right, we know that there are places that can be cut in any budget. And it's then up to the individual departments to then figure out how they can work more efficiently and control their spending. And I wouldn't say there's fat, but I think there are ways in which we can control our spending.
Well, what has to happen?
Well, I think the long-term and simple answer is that we have to reduce government spending and we have to grow our economy. There's no solution to increasing growth in our economy. And the way we're going to do that is by making this a more business-friendly state. It goes back to controlling spending, and it also goes towards having better tax policy.
Okay, I want to talk taxes because that's going to be the huge one, I believe, this session. You proposed LB 947, Nebraska Property Tax Cuts and Opportunity Act. Obviously targets the state's high property tax rates. Several aspects to the bill. The big one shifts money from the property tax credit program into a refundable income tax credit, meaning only people in Nebraska can get this. What's the logic behind that? Is it like the governor said, keep people just in Nebraska getting a deal?
Well, first of all, local governments collect property taxes. The state collects sales taxes and income taxes. But that's not to say there's not a problem there. And as Senator Erdman said in the clip that you were showing before, we certainly do have a property tax problem in our state. And we have delivered that relief in the past through a property tax credit relief measure. It does not provide certainty, and it's not embedded or baked into our tax code. The refundable tax credit that we've been talking about with the governor's budget proposal or tax proposal will provide certainty, and it will bake it into the tax code. It is a redirecting of those credits that we were using under the previous measures in a new approach.
It also caps relief on houses or credit on houses at $230.
Yes.
People who have high-end homes not going to like that.
Well, also part of the tax package is a reduction of individual income taxes. And I believe if you look at that very closely, the individuals you were just talking about, they are going to be able to make up the difference, or more than make up the difference, with a reduction in their income taxes.
Is that why the plan also lowers the top personal and corporate income rates to, what, 6.69%?
Right. Well, if you look at what's happening at the federal level with a reduction of taxes, you're seeing a lot of movement in our economy. The region is positioned to grow and to attract some of that reinvestment in the United States. And as we look at the Midwest, we have to make certain that Nebraska is competitive with neighboring states. It really comes back to the corporate and the pass-through individual income taxes. When we make our tax structure more competitive, then we're able to attract those businesses into our state, and it encourages the businesses that are here to expand. That is how we're going to grow our economy.
So what do you think about Senator Erdman's $1 billion property tax plan?
You know, I certainly appreciate and understand where Senator Erdman is coming from. We do know that taxes are too high. Property taxes are too high. Income taxes are too high. I'm a small business person myself. Taxes are too high. We have to control spending. We did not get into this problem overnight, and we're not going to get out of it overnight. But if we were to go to a ballot measure, a ballot initiative, as he is describing, my concern is that that leaves such a gaping hole in our budget, in our state's budget. It creates a crisis that I think would make it very, very difficult for us to recover from.
Are you getting any optimism from the latest income reports or projections showing that maybe we took in a little bit more last December than we expected?
Yes, I was just having a conversation with Senator Stinner, our appropriations chair, last night, and he's seeing the dollars are on an uptick. Now, we're not out of the woods by any means, but I do believe that we're going to see improvements in our standing in the budget.
If nothing happens this session, if there's no agreement, and hopefully that won't happen, but if there's no agreement, what happens?
Well, I think Nebraskans will be very disappointed. I believe that we are in a position in our state now that we have to have tax relief, and we also have to have a clear path to expanding our economy if we are to remain competitive in the region.
And this is your final session? What's your legacy going to be? Will it be the tax relief?
I certainly hope that it will be getting across the finish line. As I've told many others, the path is very narrow, but there's a path nonetheless, and I'm optimistic we can get there. But I'm going to need lots of support.
Sounds like it. All right. Senator Smith, thanks very much.
Thank you.
And up next, more tax talk. We're going to hear from Omaha Senator Burk Harr. It's when KATV News Watch 7's Chronicle continues. You're watching KATV News Watch 7's Chronicle, and this morning we're looking at three key issues the legislature's tackling this session. Two of the biggest, the budget and tax reform. And as we mentioned, right now there are at least two competing plans to provide tax relief.
Nebraska is high in both areas, and so it's tough to deal with it when the revenues are shrinking.
And that is truly the multi-million-dollar problem facing lawmakers. And joining us now is Omaha State Senator Burk Harr. Thanks very much for being here.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thank you.
First off, your impression of the governor's plan.
It's a good introduction. It's a work in progress. I don't think he would say, and I definitely would say, it's not a final product. And we have to find a way to work together. And we're working on that.
There are some concerns about cutting tax revenue when the budget is not being balanced yet. Can that even happen? I mean, it seems like we're trying to get rid of money while we still need money.
Right? And that's a great question. So, I mean, when you're in a hole, first thing you need to do is stop digging. And that's what we're looking at is what can we afford and what we can't we afford. And so we are using our rainy day fund. And I'm not sure if that's the right thing to do at this point or not. And I think we're going to have a conversation about that.
What do you prefer? Do you prefer property tax or income tax?
And by what I mean by and is what I want is to grow the economy. We need to get more businesses here, and we need to get better businesses here. And one of the things I'm proposing is workforce development. Okay. And so how do we keep high wage, high skill, high demand jobs in Nebraska?
Right. And how do we do that?
That's a great question. Well, first thing we have to do is keep our young kids. And we have to look at what kind of jobs, what are the jobs of tomorrow, and what do they want to do? And figure out how do we, working with our universities, do we create those jobs here? We had a great opportunity to bring Toast in, and we did that. We had an opportunity to bring in Toyota, and Toyota said, hey, you don't have the workforce, you need more people. And so we have to look, what are we going to do to develop that workforce?
And what would a Burke-Harr plan look like then?
Great question. You have to have an emphasis on education. Our number one asset in the state are our kids. And so I want to make sure that we're fortunate not to be distracted by mountains or water. And so I want to see what can we do to make sure those kids reach their potential. And then once they reach their potential of high school, what is it that they want to do? Do they want to go to community college? Do they want to go to the trades? Great. Let's have incentives to make sure that they can do that. And then also, what are we doing on the other end to make sure those kids who want to go to college, who want to be entrepreneurs, who want to create their own businesses, what are we doing to incentivize them and to challenge them to make sure that they can stay in Nebraska and that our best and brightest just don't leave the state?
But what about the money side of it? What about solving the budget gap?
Right. Well, you got to invest a little money to make a little money, and I've never seen anyone be able to cut their way to greatness.
Okay. What do you think about Senator Erdman's plan, the billion-dollar, $1.1 billion plan?
Well, we already tried that, or I should say Kansas tried to do that, where you cut taxes first and then figure out how to pay for it later. And I don't think that's a plan, that's a hope. And we need to do something better. We need to find a way to control spending, but at the same time grow our economy, incentivize our young people to stay here, and incentivize people to move to Nebraska.
What if he is successful to get in on a petition drive and get the voters to vote on the $1 billion? Would you support a petition drive, or would you say this thing doesn't have a chance?
Well, I haven't seen the language yet, but based on what I've heard about it, I would say I would not support it.
Gotcha. You know, there are more Republicans than Democrats in the officially nonpartisan unicameral. There's already talk of a possible filibuster along these lines in dealing with all this. If that happens, the governor would need a few people to cross the line, if you will. Would you cross the line? First off, would you even support a filibuster?
At this point, no. We are working together trying to find a solution because I think the voters do expect us to come to a solution, and they're tired of this partisan bickering. But if we are going to do something, it's going to require both sides to give. And I've been encouraged by some of the language coming from the governor, encouraged by some of the language coming from Senator Smith, but at the same time, you know, we need more than just words. I need action.
Gotcha. Action a lot of times shows up in political years as gamesmanship. There's several people in your colleagues who are running for other offices. What kind of gamesmanship should we expect when it comes down to discussing the budget and taxes and our money?
Hopefully not too much, right? I think the people sent us down there to do a job, and they sent us down to balance the budget, to figure out a way to educate our kids, to make sure we have good roads, to make sure that we have good prison system, and then our HHS system is working. And so those are my priorities, and that's what I'm going to figure out how to do in the most efficient way possible, while still trying to figure out how do we make this a place everyone wants to live.
Mm-hmm. What are your constituents telling you? What are they saying is their number one concern?
I wouldn't say there is one number one concern among my constituents, but overall I would say it's probably how do we educate our kids? How do we make sure that when my kid graduates, they can stay in Nebraska so that they don't have to move to Chicago or Minneapolis or Denver to get the job they want, because they want to be around their kids, which is understandable. I have young kids. I want them to stick around most of the time.
As a dad, I understand exactly what you're talking about. This is your last session as well. You're being term limited out. You heard me ask Senator Smith that, what the legacy question. What do you want your legacy to be in the legislature? Is it money?
No,
is it education?
I think it's culture. Okay. And what I mean by that is I hope people remember me as someone who is willing to work across party lines, someone who is willing and always listen to the other side and just didn't fall back into that tribalism and that cultural, hey, I'm this party or I'm this person, but tried to figure out a way to get moved together.
Mm-hmm. And finally then, do you think anything will get done this session? I mean, these are major issues, and it's a small amount of time. I mean, 50 days now, 50 days. Not very long.
It's going to take people working together. It's going to be very easy just to play four corners, right? And just pass the ball and do nothing. If we are serious about doing something, we're going to have to sit down, and we're going to start sitting down tomorrow. And we're going to start talking about on Monday, what are we going to do? What are our goals? And everyone have a clear definition of what they want and what they want for success. And I don't know if that exists at this time. I mean, it's easy to say no. It's hard to say yes. And we have to figure out how to do that.
I appreciate the basketball analogy as well, playing four quarters. I get it. And as we can continue, nothing is a slam dunk this year because it's a big issue. And best of luck to you.
Yeah, thank
you. Appreciate it. Yeah. Well, up next, we're going to take a look at the challenge facing Nebraska lawmakers when it comes to the state's corrections department. First, though, we value your comments, and several of you wrote to us about our show on all those treasures hidden in the basement of the Durham Museum. Wendy Meyer, for example, she's a retired elementary school teacher. She said, Rob and the guide had intelligent, informative conversations regarding different pieces and their backstories. Love that. She also praised the work our photographers did, adding, I give you an A+. Jan Whitmus sent this nice note saying, I really enjoyed your program today. Lots of wonderful old memories. Love doing that show as well. And we want to hear from you. Email your comments to news@ketv.com, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to KETV News Watch 7's Chronicle. This morning, we're looking at three key issues facing lawmakers this session. One of the larger ones has to tackle problems with the Nebraska Department of Corrections. Now, earlier this month, a coalition of state senators introduced several bills designed to address overcrowding and understaffing. The proposals come from a recent Oversight Committee report. It found the inmate population remains at 155% of design capacity, and there are 321 unfilled positions system-wide. Now, by law, the state has until 2020 to get overcrowding under 140%, or the governor has to declare an emergency and start paroling prisoners.
You talk and you talk and you study and you study, and year after year, and you find out you're going to study some more, because that seems to be the universal answer when you don't have money and are unwilling to finance what you know you have to do.
Among the suggested changes, developing an accelerated parole review plan and conducting a staffing analysis. And joining me now to talk more about that report and the bills introduced is State Senator Laura Ebke from Crete. Thanks very much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Think these bills will solve the problems?
Well, I think we have a lot of problems, and I think these bills have the potential, at least, to chip away at the problem. I don't think any one bill or any group of bills is going to fix the problem entirely.
You think something will pass at least?
I think something will probably get through the Judiciary Committee. Whether we can get it out on the floor in time and whether or not we can get it passed before the end of the session, I guess, is yet to be seen.
There have been a number of incidents at Tecumseh. That's the one that gets all the headlines all the time, some of them deadly. I've been in contact with a couple of inmates who say it's a highly charged, very dangerous situation down there. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, one of the problems that they have in Tecumseh, obviously, is that they are very understaffed, and they have a lot of turnover, and so that causes a lot of problems just from the standpoint of having experienced people who can manage some of the toughest of the tough inmates. So we're looking at options for that. We're trying to figure out ways that we can help the staff and keep people around a little longer.
Why is it so hard to keep staff there? Is it the salary? Is it the danger? What? Is it the location?
Yes.
All of those.
All of those, I think, play into it from what we can tell. We hear stories anecdotally about people who take a job at Tecumseh and then go to Douglas County or Sarpy County or Lancaster County corrections after they've been trained for a while. They make an effort to come to LCC or the state penitentiary. We don't have a lot of population in that part of the state. So certainly the workforce is a challenge in Tecumseh, but then you also have other issues like the pay.
Will it take incentives to get people to come there, and how do you pay for those?
Sure. Well, incentives may help, but it still doesn't solve the problem of not having enough people. to hire a big enough labor pool to hire from. So incentives may help. Certainly we have to deal with not only the money situation, but the negotiated agreements with the labor union. So we have a lot of pieces of the puzzle.
Let's talk about overcrowding a little bit. Governor's proposing possibly a 100-bed dormitory. Is that enough, or is that just a drop in the bucket?
It's really a drop in the bucket at this point. You know, we need to get down to probably something closer to 125%. If we're over 140% in 2020 currently, the governor is required, according to the terms of LB 605, to declare a state of emergency, and we have to figure out how to let people out at that point. 125%, 120% is really kind of the optimal number, according to most of the corrections folks.
Why not 100%?
Well, 100% would be even better, and
Right.
certainly in some of our places that's where we're at. But 120% is still manageable. Most of the corrections folks say that that you have your design capacity, which is 100%, and then you can go a little above that without putting anybody in danger, without causing too much disruption of services. But when you get significantly over that, you know, we're at about 155% now, it becomes difficult to just move people around.
Mm-hmm. Is building a new prison on the table in the discussion even feasible?
Well, one of the problems with building a new prison is that we can't staff the ones we've got now. And that's one of the concerns that we've got. The other piece of it is that it costs a lot of money. You know, the estimates that we saw a couple of years ago were that a new prison would cost us somewhere between $300 and $500 million. And so when you start talking about that kind of money in budget shortfall times, you know, we're sort of between a rock and a hard place.
So if you can't spend the money building a new prison, then obviously you want to bring down the prison population. You're talking about letting people out. One of the complaints is about prisoners not having access to enough programs to help that transition, so that cuts into the recidivism and that ugly, nasty cycle. Right. How do you solve that?
Well, that's a chicken and an egg problem we've got, really, because when you think about programming, you have to have space for programming and you have to have staff for programming. Well, when you're when you're understaffed and overpopulated, it's tough to find the space and it's tough to find the staff to do the programming. But certainly, the Department of Corrections has improved, I think, in terms of trying to get people through their programming faster. They've tried to carve out spaces within the system where they can accelerate some of the programming, but it's not going to happen overnight, I don't think.
If you had to have pick one or the other, better programs or more facilities, what would you pick? What would Senator Epke pick?
Well, I would pick you know, better programs and fully staffed. I think that we have a history throughout the country that if you build it, they will come. That you know, I would prefer not to be locking more people up. I would prefer to figure out a way to lock fewer people up whenever possible, and keep people as members of society.
If you had to give Scott Frakes a grade as being head of corrections, what would it be?
I'd give him about a B or B+. I think that he's done a significant amount of work. I think that he came into a tough situation and is trying to change a culture within the prison.
Perfect world, money's not an issue. How do you solve all these problems?
Well, if money's not an issue and the negotiated labor agreement isn't an issue, I think first of all you add on a little bit of space to the places that you've got. I think then you figure out a way to pay people significantly more than they are now, so that we're competitive with county facilities, and then we go from there.
Maybe someday.
Maybe someday.
We'll be there.
Yeah.
Senator Epke, thanks very much for joining us.
For having me.
And remember, if you missed any part of the show or you want to watch it again, it's online right now, KETV.com. Just go to our homepage, click on the menu button, and then look for Chronicle. I'm Rob McCartney. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here next Sunday morning for KETV News Watch 7's Chronicle.